will, by anybody's standards, a horrific attack. It seems to be gathering pace all across the world. Your thoughts initially, before we discuss in greater detail, is this something we're going to see more and more?
I think it is, unfortunately, and I think we're all realistic to the fact that this problem isn't going away anytime soon. And I think also, as the coalition are gaining ground and the Iraqi forces are getting ground, obviously, in Iraq and Syria, and closing in on those various positions that Islamic State had taken as part of their caliphate, if you like, I think, unfortunately, we're going to see more returning fighters. And it's now down to the authorities in various parts of continental Europe that hopefully are on their game to prevent these individuals getting back amongst us.
So what does that present for us as a risk here? Because it seems, doesn't it, that there's two big step changes. One, this possible use of explosives, gas canisters, inside the car that then turns a car already deadly and mowing people down, turns it into a bomb. And two, police saying that they believe an imam is involved.
Yes, let's cover the first point, the VBIED, as we would call it, which is a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. We've seen them, I've seen them in Iraq, Afghanistan, when I've been down there. They're a highly effective and devastating tool of a weapon. And what we're seeing with a lot of these marauding terrorists is that they will have various parts of their attack cycle. It may involve a car initially, then they'll move to ground with knives or guns to carry out further attacks. But if they're now going to start introducing explosive components to that, again, one can only imagine the potential devastation. And we look at the devastation from the detonation in Alcanor of this device that they were trying to build, and it was quite phenomenal. And if we put that in a confined area, even worse.
I mean, I think this would be something that I was wanting to ask somebody for a long time. How can you legislate if you have terrorists, wherever they come from, of the mindset that I'm going to fly a plane into a building, 9/11, I'm going to drive a car full of explosives into innocent people walking down the road, I'm going to walk into a pop concert with a vest on that's got explosives, without getting religious? How, in the name of whatever, can you legislate? How can you be secure against that? How can you find that?
It's a good point, Jeremy. And I think the best way to try and encapsulate it is about creating as many barriers, psychological, physical and otherwise, to make it more difficult for them. And I think one of the simplest analogies someone used on me once, when we were talking about suicide bombers, was that if someone only walks across the street to carry out an attack, it's very easy and without any kind of restriction. Yeah. If they have to crawl through razor wire to get to their objective, it's going to be a lot harder. So if they detonate...
You can't do that in everyday life.
No, absolutely. But what you can do is try and put in some kind of physical and psychological barriers.
So what are we talking about? Concrete barriers along the side of roads, through the centre of towns? I mean, what kind of barriers do we need now?
Well, we can't, unfortunately, eliminate the risk completely. No. What we've got to do is channel the attackers into various different routes and isolate and remove certain opportunities that they have. Now, regrettably, putting in things like bollards, concrete blocks, is just one of those ways to remove that opportunity or that possible route to exploit.
The problem is, though, isn't it, if you put them into what you might call the sort of targets you'd expect, they just move to other targets.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you cover the cities, centres where a lot of people gather.
Outside the cities.
You then worry we'll go outside the cities. That's the frightening thing, isn't it?
It is the frightening thing. But, you know, as Jeremy was saying, you can't necessarily stop them. But what you can do is try and isolate the opportunities for them.
And, of course, the other thing is, you know, for people watching this, waking up this morning, you want to be as safe and secure, you don't want to frighten people, but you have to be realistic. Kate made a very good point as well. And, again, it's a real hot potato, isn't it, religiously? But over the weekend, after Barcelona, an imam was implicated in what happened. Let's just put it like that, because somebody will jump up and down. I think that's a first, isn't it?
It's an interesting avenue in terms of imams. And I was talking to some good Muslim friends over the weekend about the definition of what an imam is. And I think that needs to be explored a great deal more, because fundamentally anybody who has a large number of supporters can potentially elect themselves as an imam. And therefore there are...
Maybe not tied to a mosque.
Not necessarily tied to a mosque either. And we look at this particular individual, Al-Tabaki Asati. He, 5 years ago, was in prison for trafficking hashish from Morocco into Spain, and where he came into contact with Rashid, who was one of the Madrid bombers in 2004. He is very much the mastermind.
So he then became an imam after that, we believe,
or could be using the label.
Absolutely, and could have been radicalised within prison. So there are so many interesting component parts coming out now in the intelligence, which in some ways is going to be massively helpful for the intelligence agencies, certainly in terms of the Audi and the Cambril attack, which was identified a week ago in Paris. And the connectivity between various different cell groups and operators, which in some ways, I know it doesn't sound very good, but it is kind of reassuring, rather than the lone actor, the bedroom terrorist, that is virtually impossible to detect.
Well, thank you. Fascinating. It'll roll on and on. Yeah.